Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer 3 mod review. You see, there's been a lot of mods coming into the workshop and I've been discussing quite a lot, but I've realized that I've kind of been ignoring the Kislevite ones, which leads to a bit of an imbalance as many new factions have new units, loads of new lords and so on, but Kislev is kind of getting a little spanked. So I went into the workshop and found a rather nice mod which adds in a little bit more flavor, gives you more of an on-goal feel to your Kislevite armies, and the mod in question is Dead's Kislev units. Now, we've covered this modder in the past, so let's not waste any more time and jump right in. So the first unit in question is the Droiash. This is a melee unit but uses additional hand weapons. They are melee experts, they're very fast, they've got whirling blades too, and also have the ability of death blow. It's pretty good all around, pretty cheap. This mod doesn't really focus on a lot of elites, but rather adds in a bit more flavor to the early game units more than anything, and honestly it's pretty good. All in all, does a decent amount of damage. I've used it quite a decent amount of time too. I must say that it adds a bit more punch. Plus, it's always good to have these units which are focused on additional hand weapons, as they're more anti-infantry based, they're more damage dealers than most, and just generally it adds a little bit more of a punch. Next we have the Kavas Nikki, and keep in mind I am going to butcher these pronunciations horribly. Anyways, it's a melee hybrid unit, it's got a little bit of range, nothing too big, it's actually there just to do a little bit of fire damage early on, which is good against, say for example, Nurgle, which has a lot of regeneration, but it's a low tier unit. Stat-wise, it isn't too bad, and its damage output is more or less depending on what you're actually going to be fighting. Don't expect this to be the best fighter all around, but it's well balanced, and having a bit of a fire attack right before you get into contact, that's always really helpful. Think of these in a very similar way as to what we have with the Chameleon Skinks. Next we have the durable Vicky, which is a close quarters missile infantry unit, decent stats all around, very high armor. They're able to do a decent amount of damage, but I wouldn't say that they are the perfect range unit. In fact, I'd say do a bit of shots for these guys because 90 range isn't too bad. You've also got, you know, some armor piercing and a decent amount of ammunition, but they're good for close combat too. Another hybrid unit, this is keeping on the theme with how Kislev currently is, where it's a lot of hybrid stuff. It's very much dependent on how you use this in the battlefield. I'm still kind of learning them myself, but I found them quite good for choke points or just some extra supporting fire, because they do move around fairly quick, you know, 30 speed is still pretty good. Not great, but good. And their decently high armor will make sure that if they get attacked, they will hold out for a fair amount of time, which, you know, you're playing Kislev, you're going to get attacked often. Next we have the Urugan cannon, which is essentially just a Hellblaster volley gun or an organ gun. It uses the same assets as that and the base skeleton of that of an organ gun, and we're already used to seeing these already, but just for those who haven't played Warhammer 1 races before, this is a rather good output for shooting. It's 290 range, so it's pretty far. You've got a lot of damage output there. It's something that you kind of want to deal with hordes, and we're kind of dealing with a lot of hordes when it comes to Warhammer 3 because of all of the demon factions, so it's a very good support artillery piece. And lastly, Warbears. Now yes, many of us are fatigued about Kislev having bears, and more bears, but the fact is that these were an actual unit when it came to Warmaster. So I was actually really surprised when we had all the bears that we didn't actually have a bear unit, you know, just the monsters themselves. Well, animals. But either way, these are quite large, as you can see, armor piercing, they can rampage, a few units can rampage, they cause fear, high physical resistance, and yeah, it's a big monstrous unit. Just in case you don't want the riders, you just want the bears because they're cheaper, here you go. All the units themselves are available in custom battle, but also in campaign, and they're spread out through your basic recruitment buildings, as you can see. The great thing is that the unit cards kind of fit so well with the actual vanilla stuff that everything kind of gets lost, but you will see it as you start going through the buildings. And yeah, I mean, the style's good. It won't be too long until you can start unlocking those units. They're all pretty much in the areas that you expect them to be, and I think everything from this is available from tier 3. Well, tier 1 all the way to tier 3. And that works out quite well because that means that you have everything very early on. So what I'm going to do now is show off a battle as usual against a random Nurgle army. And I'm going to talk to you about my experience with the mod, how I felt it, how I feel about the units and all that. So let's just begin. I'm using only the modded units and obviously a generic lord choice, a Boyar. And I must say that the units are quite cool. They don't work too well by themselves. The idea is, I think, from my interpretation, that they synergize very well with other stuff, but having an army of just the modded units is not a good idea, at least depending on what you're fighting against. However, it adds into more flavor. Kislev does feel kind of, you know, samey, and it's a bit of an issue since launch. But I think that it works out quite well to just bring in a bit more. The bears themselves are good. The organ guns themselves are very, very helpful. I've been using them in the campaign, and it just adds in a lot more, especially when you start to notice it in later game, where you do need a little bit more artillery, because Little Grom is cool, but it doesn't really do everything for you. Having access to Warbears also kind of works out quite well, especially if you want to play as Boris, and you just want to go with, you know, with bear riders, and just now bear support, just having all the bears, because Kislev is all bears for some reason now. When it comes to the other units, again, it's something that you need to think on how to use them, where they synergize best, where you can actually place them in places, and what units they will be up against. It's a thing that it kind of feels very vanilla-ish, and that's a big compliment. That is honestly a very big compliment, because it feels like it's just an addition to the base game roster, rather than being something completely different. The grand majority of the units here won't be for late game, that's very much certain, but it definitely adds in a lot more flavor, and I think you can't really go wrong with that. I'm honestly quite surprised, because sometimes you want a lot of new stuff, you want new and shiny stuff, but this worked out really, really well. It felt like what you'd imagine in a Kislev army book. I'd say if you want another excuse for a Kislev campaign and you want a little bit more flavor, try out this mod. It'll be linked in the description below. It's honestly really, really good. And I'm going to let the rest of the battle play out, just so you can see the capabilities of some of the units, how they work, and yeah, I'll see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.
Liberty incarnate!
Fight safety! The motherland's finest!
Go with honor!
The motherland's finest! Bring them down!
Find safety!
Abandon the fight! Obey the orthodoxy!
Lord of the motherland!
Comrades, retreat! Indeed!
Boyar of Kislev!